Hi there guys, Neil at Italia Autos here. Welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we are back with the Fiat Coupe. Turns out it was quite a popular video that. Barn finds normally do go down quite well. So this week we're going to be tackling the welding on the front. We're also going to be doing the brakes, the suspension and the shockers, and we'll see how far we can get as to how much of that I put in this video. So join me on this journey, and don't forget, if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, and hopefully you enjoy it.
So guys, here we are starting with the Cambelt. It's a very lengthy process on these Fiat Coupes. You've got to remove all the sort of standard gubbins from the engine, like the coil packs, spark plugs, the Cambelt side cover. But on these you also have to remove every single engine mount and support the engine from underneath, so you can slide it over just an inch, maybe an inch and a half, so you can then eventually get to the water pump and the tensioners to pull them off. Now, when refitting these engine covers, you have to be very careful of these bolts on the right hand side, because there's not much aluminium there, and if you over torque them just by a slightest amount, you can crack the engine cover, and I imagine they're getting rather hard to find nowadays.
So it's not too bad on the inside here. You can see a little bit of build-up of carbon, but it's not that bad. So right, let's crack on with this Cambelt.
The first problem I've came across is we've got a broken bolt for the crank pulley. Just struggling to remove the belt because it was extremely tight, so just removing this bearing down here gave me that little bit of extra room I needed just to pull the belt off. Now let's just move the cooling bottle out of the way so we can see how little access we have to the side of the engine. And as you can see there, I think you have less than 1 centimetre access to get in there and get the bolts out. So you can see why you have to move this engine over. So let's remove the spark plugs with my surgical tool. And we'll replace those later. All the bores look nice and clean from what I could tell. And I've just removed one of the engine mounts now, jacked it up a bit so I can get my little tool in there and get the engine cover off the side. And now with that removed, we have access to the Cambelt area. As you can see down there, it doesn't look too bad. The water pump looks as though it has been changed at some point. Now I've just rotated the engine to top dead centre, and as you can see, the engine was perfectly in time. So now let's get this Cambelt off and see the condition of that.
Seen worse.
Now let's get the water pump off and check the condition of that. I don't expect it to be that bad, to be honest, because it didn't look as though it's had much use. They have siliconed it on, but in this case I would agree with them doing it, because the last thing I would want is, once you put it back together, is for the water pump to be leaking. So I've also done the same, and I have also sealed it as well. There we go, water pump on, all new tensioners on, ready to go to refit the cam belt. But first of all, I need to remove this broken nut, and luckily it just was hand tight, so I could unscrew it with my hands.
Just doing the oil filter now, and I think somebody must have put it on with an impact gun, because it has taken some force to get it off. So almost out now. It's in quite a bit. Oh my god, how much turning? Right, it's off.
Now from here on in the video, it does get a little bit to-y and fro-y, because I was doing several jobs at once on the car while I was waiting for different parts to arrive. I jumped on the rear brakes and started doing those, and the suspension came after that, and then we'll jump back to a bit more on the engine, and then I think we'll move to the rust as well. Lubrication on the hub. Now we're cleaning the disc off of all the contaminants that are on it from the factory. Quick wipe over, and now we are ready to fit it once we've cleaned the channels for the brake pads out. And for those about to comment, oh, you shouldn't be using an impact gun on those, my impact gun has 3 different settings, so you don't have to worry about me over talking them. Now, removing these little securing plates for the springs can be a proper pain, because if this rubber has gone quite old, the nut inside will just constantly spin, meaning sometimes you do have to take a grinder to it and remove the nut that way. But luckily, with a little pair of pliers, I was able to secure it and then undo it. But it did snap anyway.
Now, it's very easy to lose this bolt into the chassis when you're putting this shocker back in, so the only way I would tell you to do it is a reasonably strong magnet on the end. You can then pop it through the hole, give it a few turns, push the magnet off, and then do it all up with the torque wrench.
And there we go, suspension all done. Just tightening it up here. Everything will be torqued up off camera as always.
So I've just pushed that shocker in and it should come back out again, and it hasn't. Let's try this one. Nope, both those shockers were knackered. So I'm just going to do the rocker cover now, get that back on the car, and I must apologise because I was wrong. There wasn't tons of silicone in here. It's all from the factory. I was thinking it was like a twin spark engine, and somebody put loads of silicone in it, but they haven't. It's just this bit from the factory that you can see.
Now, the gaskets on these rocker covers are extremely thin, so I like to give them a little tap with a hammer just to help them get seated so they don't fall out when you turn it upside down and try and put it back on the engine.
While I've been putting it back together, I have noticed we have got some issues with the wiring down here. Try and get it to focus. It's been chewed all here. That has been chewed through there. That looks okay, that looks okay, and that one looks okay. So I've got some repairs to do to this bit of loom down here.
So before the engine was started, I did do several other checks. I also changed the oil in the vehicle and got the engine to rotate a little bit before I properly started the car. And as you can hear, it did start and sound perfectly fine. Now the old air filter wasn't in that bad of a condition, so it kind of makes me think with the condition of the Cambelt that this vehicle did see some love before it was taken off the road.
I've repaired the loom here, I've soldered it together, stuck some heat shrink and some tape around it.
And now it's time to tackle this rusty arch, and as you can see, there was only like a couple of smaller holes before I started poking it with the screwdriver, and in a minute you can see how big this hole actually gets by the time I've cut back to all the good metal. Now everything is going to be replaced under here. It does make sense to take it all out now so I can have really good access to where I need to weld, get rid of literally every single spot of rust I can, treat it all, and then we can start welding it all back together. And again, so some of you keyboard warriors, if you look at where the brake caliper is being held, there is a cable tie holding it up in the air, and I will also be doing the same for the hub so it is not dangling. And now everything's removed from the hub, I can start the longer task of grinding all this rust away. And don't worry, I did remove this brake pipe a little bit later on and just positioned it further down so it wasn't in the way. But as you can see, as time goes on, this hole is getting bigger and bigger, and then the more to the right there's more holes, and it is about to turn into just mulch.
Now as you can see, those couple of little small rust spots have turned into several large holes. So all this has got to be cut out along here. This is actually sort of double skinned, so I need to cut out around here and all the way along here and make it all again.
And also for those eagle-eyed viewers there are fuel pipes behind there, so I did use a thick bit of metal to protect them. And now I'm just grinding down the welds so I can remove this piece of metal without affecting the area underneath it. Now I do think the customer was extremely lucky with this, because if this had been any more further in to the chassis leg, I'd have had to remove the subframe to enable me to remove all the rust and weld in, but luckily it wasn't too bad other than this spot, which you see I'm tidying up now. But as soon as I take the hammer to it, you can see it's all falling apart behind. But yeah, if that had gone any further up, that subframe would have had to come off as well. Now this foam is flammable, so I have to remove as much as this as possible, otherwise we could end up having the car and the garage burning to the ground. And there we go, all cut out, ready for paint and primered up. I also used some rust converter in there as well beforehand.
So the first round of welding is done. All I've done is just made this lip here, not the tidiest job in the world, but it's all held on really tight. And all that's there for is so I can spot weld the front panel onto this here. So I'm going to crack on with that next.
So now here is the long process of making the template for the repair panel. Now I'd rather get this perfect, so when I weld it all in, it looks a little bit more original than just blobbing a bit of metal over it and patching it up. I wanted it to look as close to original as possible. Now with my abilities, I'm not a trained welder, I'm not a trained fabricator, so I have done my best with this. I know you can still see the welds underneath, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a good quality repair. All the welded on panels were acid etched primered behind, so to stop it from rusting. So as you can see here, you can see bare metal on the front, but behind it was covered in primer. And then once it's all welded on, I will cover it with another thick layer of primer. Now I was actually quite pleasantly surprised with how well this fit, so now I'm just tacking it on in places just to get it all lined up and straight, and then I can sort of push it and hammer it into position and weld the rest of it up. And there we go, the first of the main panels is welded up, so let's get it covered in some primer and then we can move on to the next stage. Second panel was made up off camera, but yeah, still the same process. A little bit of paper just cut to the right size and then we can use the metal and manipulate it into the right shape. So now all the welding's finished, just going to knock back my welds a little bit more to tidy it up, and then we can start with the process of priming, painting, lacquering, and then lots and lots of stone chip to protect it. And before I start painting, I am degreasing the whole area because the hammer I was using had a little bit of grease on it, so I didn't want that to affect the paint job. Now I'm just masking it all up so I can put some seam sealer over all my welds and protect it all. And this seam sealer is messy stuff, so try and not get it all over your hands. I think that's a pretty tidy job considering that's finished. Yes, the shape probably could be a little bit better, and yes, you can still see some of my welds underneath it, but overall, I think that's a pretty mighty fine job for a day's work.
And as you can see, the front shockers are worn out. They're not retracting, so they've lost all their pressure. Loads of rust underneath here, and rust behind here as well. Well, I was hoping to finish the video with it being back on all four wheels, but unfortunately the brake pads I was sent are the wrong ones, and also the customer has come and picked up the wheels and taken them to be refurbished and have some new tyres fitted to them. So we're a little bit stuck now. I think this video is going to be quite long because I have sort of whittled 3 days of footage into one video, so I think it's going to be quite a long one. So hopefully you've enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one.